heartfelt law, society, scholarship, and fandom. Welcome to Semantic Shenanigans.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode number 14 of Semantic Shenanigans. As always, I am Janet Gershon-Siegel, and joining me from inside a meat locker where she's warming up is my co-host, Shanna Gilkison.
Hey, and you know what? There's so much white on the ground, I can't see corn anymore.
Oh my god, the corn has dandruff. What the hell happened there?
It always comes back to the corn, doesn't it?
All roads lead to the corn, apparently.
I saw that movie. It didn't end well for anybody.
But there was a sequel, right? So we got up this morning. It was like 5 above here. How about there?
It was 3 when I woke up this morning, so I shudder to think of what it did overnight. It was like probably minus something. I've been avoiding going out. I had to today because, groceries. But yeah, I haven't been wanting to deal with the outside at all. Like, I haven't even checked the mailbox in 3 days. I'm going to begrudgingly go out there tomorrow.
Yeah, I have to go out to get my haircut tomorrow, and it's just going to be like, styled for about 5 seconds, and then the hat goes back on.
Right. Well, at least, if you get it blown out straight, then the hat won't matter as much. Spray some static guard in there before you go to the salon.
Yes.
No, I'm serious. I'm a retired hairdresser, right? So I know that. So spray the static guard in your hat and spray the static guard in your brushes, and then you won't get like the crazy hat hair so much. And try to avoid, like, if you use styling products, try to avoid anything that's sticky, like gel or mousse, because like that'll react with your body heat and kind of like mash that impression of the hat into your hair. Use cream-based products.
See, this is an educational program. I'm just imagining my husband, coming over to me, later on tomorrow and saying, "What's that cologne you're wearing?" "It's Static Guard, honey." It's driving me wild.
That's hot.
God, and we do have to maintain a rating here, folks. On that happy note.
Drinking.
Oh, I'm sorry. What?
On that happy note, I was just going to say I'm drinking wine for this show, so rating schmating. I don't know.
Yeah, we still have champagne downstairs. Maybe I'll ask him to get me a glass. This will be really interesting. So what's been going on in your life?
So last time, I think I had just finished taking my prelim exams, which if you are unfamiliar with graduate school, particularly PhD programs, for my program, it's kind of like the essay test from hell. You have, 7 to 8 days to write 4 papers, basically 4 essays, research papers, that kind of thing, to kind of show your dissertation committee that you basically know what you're talking about and that you're ready to get in and start a dissertation, that you've paid attention in class, that the fundamentals of your discipline, and about your specialty. So I passed. In fact, I got high passes on most things, and then the way it works, you get like the options of high pass, marginal pass, which is the skin of your teeth kind of thing, and then you fail, right? So I got mostly high passes and a couple of passes, so I'm happy.
Yeah.
It was certainly a better outcome than I hoped for. So we go through after that what they call the oral defense. So basically, I have to like stare down my committee while they ask me clarifying questions about the things that I wrote, and ask me about some of my choices and that kind of thing. But since I did well, I'm kind of not sweating it. It's not going to be, the dragnet thing, like, oh no, not the light, right? Because that's what it kind of sounds like when you call it a defense. But it's going to be probably more like a 2 hour long conversation. And 2 of my 3 committee members really like Star Wars, which is what my dissertation is going to involve. So I don't know. Maybe it'll be a really fun geek fest.
You never know. But hey, congratulations. So yay.
Well, thank you. So, I've been kind of just trying to take the winter break easy, but I only have about a week left before Bowling Green starts up again. So, I've got all this course prep stuff to do, syllabi to make and all that kind of stuff. But in there, I did get to go see The Last Jedi a couple times. In fact, some friends and colleagues and I went up to Ann Arbor in Michigan to like the really big IMAX theater up there to see it in 3D on the anniversary of Carrie Fisher's death. So, we had the pilgrimage to honor her, and I found the missing pants from last time.
Where in the vortex were they?
So, okay. When you're in grad school, you kind of choose certain areas of adulting to like let go of because you're so busy and so tired and so brain drained. So I have a couple of, let's say, laundry baskets of things that I don't wear that often. So they just kind of like never made it back into the closet. And somehow they ended up in there, but like out of the basket. So I think that I just kind of like threw them into the closet on the flourish while I was digging through those baskets looking for something else.
So they migrated and then gravity did the rest?
Yeah, and then they had to go back into the wash because, they were clean at one point, but by the time the cats are like, oh, kitty bed, then I've got all this Sherman and squiggy hair all over that needs to come out.
It's a fashion statement.
Woo! Yeah. So yeah, no furry pants for me. That's not a good work look. So how about you? What have you been doing since we did this last time?
Yeah, since we did this last time. So I finished the original draft of Metal, which was the NaNoWriMo novel, and that topped out at a little bit over 121,000 words. And God, that thing needs editing, but that will be sometime later, because it's always a good idea to leave it for a while, because then you go back and you got fresh eyes. It's easier to see where the problems are, and also you're not quite so committed and married to what you wrote, so you're more willing to change things and say, oh look, I didn't need this character. What the hell are they doing in there? But I will probably not be getting rid of any of the swearing in that.
Yay!
There's over 200 times the characters drop the F-bomb, and they dropped a bunch of other bombs at least a good 100 times in addition to that. And but if the world was ending, you probably would too. So resolutions for this year, I actually had writing resolutions, and so what I want to try to do is write a lot more like the late great Ray Bradbury did. And not to say that I'm at his level, because God knows I'm not, but it's more that you sit down, butt in chair, fingers on keys, and you write something like 1,000 to 2,000 words per day. And what he said is that you can't write 52 bad short stories in a row. So somewhere in there, it's going to be something good. So that's hopeful. And but I'm not going to be doing this all year. What I intend to do is sort of switch off. So like the odd number months, I want to do the writing, and the even number months, I want to do everything that goes along with writing, which is the editing, the working with beta readers, the getting it polished, talking to cover artists, and querying, getting it out there. So I really want to try to get more of this stuff out there, because Untrustworthy was published 3 years ago, and the little things that I did for various charity anthologies are all about 1 to 2 years old as well. So so I need to get something else out there. The bathroom still isn't finished.
What?
There's a medicine chest on the floor, because the first medicine chest we purchased was not the correct type, and the return window had closed. So I have an extra medicine chest. If you need one, I have one.
So you going to Craigslist that thing then, or?
I don't know. I think we're going to see if we can get it to fit into the upstairs bathroom. So that might turn out to be what happens to it. So whatever. Maybe I'll ship it to my brother. But the handyman guy can't come because he's in Haiti right now on vacation. But he'll be back like in a couple of days. And we have had snow, but at least the driveway's finally clear. And that's just in time for it to snow again on Thursday.
Oh, fantastic.
And the other thing is, so I'm like, trying to adult here, sort of. And otherwise, life's kind of quiet. I had rewatched Discovery in preparation for its return, on the 7th, yay! And I found the missing top.
Woo! Hooray for finding our clothes.
So it was located within, there's I have a bunch of chemicals and I keep them in a bag on that's hanging from a hook in my closet. And the reason why is because I don't have enough drawers. And so it's like, grab this, okay, put this on, or, whatever. And for whatever reason, I decided that a t-shirt would be awfully awesome in this bag. And so it got thrown in there with a bunch of other stuff. And, I'm looking everywhere. And my husband's looking everywhere. And we're, like, did you put it in for goodwill? It's sort of, we're having those conversations. And so yay, it got found. And yes, it also needed to be rewashed because life happens. But yes, we're adulting. We're succeeding at adulting. What a concept.
Go us.
Go us.
We're the good example now.
Yeah, last month we were losing our clothes. Now we've got them back and just in time for it to be freaking cold.
I still haven't hung anything up yet though, just saying. No, seriously, like, I've been doing this thing where I will even just dress out of the dryer because, like, I kind of know what's in there because I just washed it.
And it's warm. It's warm.
Right, and it makes the kind of, like, is it clean and does it match game a little bit easier.
So similar outfits every 9 days or so.
Well, as a retired hairdresser, like, almost everything I own is black, right? So...
So it goes.
So yeah. So I'm sometimes plagued by do these blacks match?
Which is so weird. You would think that it's just it's black. It's the absence of color. That's all it should be. But I'll tell you, I am head to toe in black right now myself because it's like the only because I'm trying to absorb whatever sunlight I can. And I've got these cargo pants and this it's actually a top for long underwear, and they don't quite go, but I don't care.
But how you were talking about New Year's resolutions, and so for academics, those actually get made in August, and the academics in our posse will get that, but that's because our year goes from August or September until April, May, right? Mm-hmm. So that's when we make all these resolutions about, okay, I'm gonna stay on top of my writing. I'm gonna get into these conferences. I'm gonna get these things out for journal publication, and I'm gonna stay on top of my grading. And it never happens, right? So our resolutions are the same. But I'm doing a normal one this year, and when the yoga studio in town reopens tomorrow, I am signing up for yoga because I used to do it. I liked it. I miss it. I've gained some weight since grad school, and let me tell you, nothing makes you rethink what you're about to put into your mouth than knowing you are going to have to experience the discomfort of folding yourself over your own body later on that day.
Yeah, I hear you, sister. I've been I'm up and down constantly, and I've been on this current thing for over a year now. It's sort of it's medically supervised kind of deal, and I'm 40 pounds down from what I was, and the difference in your life is so amazing. Oh my God.
Yeah, so, it's speaking as you were of adulting. So I'm not even trying to treat this as a New Year's resolution because I don't do that. And I notice that I tend to have more ambition in the summer months when I'm warmer and happier. But I have a friend and colleague who said that he is considering signing up for yoga too. So, it might be that buddy thing, if you think twice about not going if there's that other person who's going to think you're chomping them out.
Yeah, you've got the accountability partner. Yeah, I have like nobody here to do that with because my husband is like, this little, he's a skinny guy. Because he's always been athletic. He's always been, one of these people who like run everywhere and do stuff all the time. And he played ultimate frisbee a lot in high school and then in college too. So yeah, and he'll run, but it's been crappy out, so he hasn't.
Too bad we can't Skype you into yoga.
I know, that would be nice. and I did yoga. Oh my God! But I was a teenager though. I did it with my father, which was kind of interesting. And it's like hello, Miss, whatever her name was, and this is my dad. So I got to call him Bernie while we were in school, which was kind of.
Oh, that's fun.
So apart from all these weather and health related and New Year's kind of stuff, you wanna get into show stuff? How about that?
Yeah. So since this is kind of an ethical thing, but also it is an ethical thing, but there's going to be a lot of legal ramifications. So why don't you take this one away? Let's talk about the updates to the sexual harassment list.
Oh God! So first off, I had no idea what kind of a task I was taking on when I started that damn thing because it's very long already, and I'm trying to find a way to limit it. So, for example, I didn't put in anybody who was who's known for being, somebody within the religious field, because particularly here in Boston, it would be a ton of Catholic priests and stuff, and so I didn't want to go down that road. But the list continues, and it, it's funny. My husband keeps finding these articles for me and sending them. So a lot of women they get flowers from their significant others. I get links to URLs about creepers.
It's true love.
Honey, I saw this and thought of you. So NFL analysts Heath Evans and Marshall Faulk have been added to our list, as has Miguel Sano, the third baseman for the Minnesota Twins, and David Boreanaz. Is that how you say that?
I don't know. I'm Team Spike.
Okay, so I used to say Boreans, but there's an extra A in there, so I don't know what to do with it. The guy from Buffy, and other things, and from Bones too. He apparently he was doing some pretty nasty things a few years ago. So it's very interesting. This is on the list now. You can see sort of this stuff is from a couple of years ago, and the attitude from the people reporting is very different from the attitude of people reporting about almost the exact same stuff now, because it's more like, oh, it was kind of a ridiculous accusation, and it's sort of like this belittling of the victim. And so fortunately things are turning around, and even though yes, sometimes people are falsely accused, I think that there's more of a that we're more inclined to initially believe the victim these days, as opposed to believing the person being accused. The other bit of interesting news is that our first woman on the list has been added. Her name is Andrea Ramsey. She has accusations of sexual harassment against her. If she's not a household name, and she probably wouldn't be, she's a Democrat from Kansas, and she dropped out of her race for the U.S. House because of the allegations against her. So yeah, it's not just guys who do this. I mean, but it is overwhelmingly male. Yeah.
I just want to put this out there too. So in the interest, I mean, we are including women on the list in the interest of being egalitarian and fair. But what I want to make perfectly clear is that when men do it, they are supported by generations of systemic misogyny telling them that it's okay. All right. Women have no such social support, for lack of a better word, for committing some pretty heinously ethically questionable, right on up to violations on men. So on the one hand, we are acknowledging that yes, women do commit these crimes, and it's just as bad when they do it. But I want to make it abundantly clear that it is not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, and one of the reasons also why we're not seeing as many women on this list is because one of the groups that I intentionally left out of this, and it was not to make women look better, I might add, but one of the groups that I intentionally left out of this list was teachers. Because we have seen Pamela Smart, I believe is the name of one of them, where these teachers, usually younger women, but not always, who would have relationships, quote unquote, with teenage and sometimes even tween boys in their classes.
Yeah, and I want to add too, and this comes from my having minored in psychology as an undergrad, but one of the things that we learn there too is that when we're talking about minors, it's an issue of access. We've grown into the society where we think of sexual molestation and rape and all these awful things. We tend to contextualize that as stranger danger, but statistically, stranger danger is negligible. It does happen. Those are the stories that we remember, but mostly it's people that we know and trust that commit these crimes. And when we're talking about crimes against minors, it's not the same thing as sexual harassment. Sexual harassment and sexual assault can seem kind of similar, but when you're talking about children, it is different.
Yeah, absolutely, and and I've seen a number of people online in particular who've said, well, he was willing, or that the minor was willing, is whether this is a male or a female minor, I might add, or that the adult couldn't tell that someone was underage. Well, that's not an excuse. It's not a defense. What we have in the United States is when you have sex with a minor, under the age of consent, because the age of consent very often turns out to be less than 18. But if let's say if the age of consent is 16 and you have sex with a minor who is 15 years old, then nobody cares whether there was any consent at all, and nobody cares whether there was any violence, any coercion, any harassment, or anything of the sort. It is considered it's basically no fault. It's that if the birth certificate says that they're under 16 or whatever the age of consent is, period, end of story. It's sexual abuse. It is statutory rape. There's no arguing it.
And, that does bring up an interesting sticky problem that we talked about, particularly in the psychology of atypical sexuality class that I took a few years ago as an undergrad. And that's when you get the Romeo and Juliet situation. So a relationship that was okay yesterday can, in the eyes of the law, not be okay today simply because you've had a birthday.
Yeah, it's a weird, we do this and we draw a line because we have to draw a line someplace, and there has to be a bright line so that people know when where the line is, and so that if they cross it or if they don't cross it, that they make those decisions intelligently. But yeah, where the line gets crossed often is kind of in an odd place.
Yeah, and so, some states, I think, have laws that kind of account for that, like if both parties are in high school, it's still okay, that kind of thing. But other places do not. So it's not even a matter where you can just kind of go with, what you think are common sense assumptions. You really have to look into the law of your state and even your city or county.
It's we've got this cruel joke as human beings, as Homo sapiens, that we become sexually mature or mature-ish at often an extraordinarily young age, and our brains haven't caught up with that.
It's brains and it's our society. I mean, keep in mind too, like particularly since World War II, but even since the beginning of the 20th century, adolescence is something that we've kind of grown protective of. If you look at Little House on the Prairie days, though, yeah, you were married off at 12 and 13, and you were expected to function as a man or as a woman at that age. So it isn't even just biological. Socially, we've changed quite a bit.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's 150 years ago. You could be a widower at 15.
Yeah, and to think about that now, that's a trip.
Yeah, for us now, obviously that's nuts. But for them, it was business as usual. Yeah, we are. We tend to give people a chance to have an adolescence, because there's more to learn, so education's more important. You need more of it. And we've got birth control, so we tend to have fewer children. So extending their childhood is something that a lot of people want to do. And we also have antibiotics, and we have all these reasons why people will live longer and are more likely to live and less likely to die in childbirth or within the first 2 years of their lives. So we don't need as many children. Most of us are off the farm, and we've got mechanization. So even for the people who are on the farm, they don't need 10 kids.
Wow, this took a turn.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But that's okay, because you learn stuff on our show.
Not just about static cling.
Right? You are going to learn so much by the time this episode is over, I promise.
We are here for you. So anyway, the list is ongoing. If you think of anybody else who I have missed, feel free to drop us a line. You can, which is hosts, that's plural, at semanticshenanigans.com, or you can just toss a note onto our, you can tweet at us, which is this number 2 shenanigans, or send us a note through Facebook or even through the website. So please, if I'm missing somebody, or if you think I've mischaracterized someone, please tell us. We want this to be right.
And let me tell you, Janet has put a lot of work into this list. I mean, when she was saying that she wasn't sure how daunting this task would be, audience, I want you to know that she has put a lot into this, and it's especially difficult in this current climate where we feel like every time we turn around, somebody else is surfacing. So given that there's only so many hours in a day, a lot of what's going to kind of keep our list good and current are tips from you. So please, if you have a tip, by all means, send it to us.
Yes, thank you. And thank you. I appreciate it. And my God, it's one depressing thing to read. So here I am touting it, but it's a really depressing thing to read. So please, if you're at all mentally shaky, maybe hold off.
It's depressing, but it's necessary.
Yeah, exactly. Because these people should be, their feet should be put at the fire, and they should be held accountable. So, yeah, I'm sorry. Please.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to move on because I'm depressed, but
so was I. Well, this one's kind of bittersweet. So on December 27th, it was the first anniversary of Carrie Fisher's death. Star Wars fans know her as Princess Leia, later on General Leia. She was a well-respected writer, script doctor around Hollywood. But what she's kind of become really known for is what a loyal and vocal fandom she has cultivated, particularly on Twitter. And, when a celebrity dies, there's that initial shock. People talk about it for a while, and then it's kind of that thing that only comes up once in a while.
And often on anniversaries, or on anniversaries with a number 5 at the end of them.
Right. Well, in Carrie's case, though, nobody really seemed to stop grieving, especially if you're tuned into her fandom on Twitter. The last year, I can't count how many tweets I've read from fans who say how much they still miss Carrie, how much of a void that she has left in their lives, and so I started to give a lot of thought to what has made Carrie Fisher different. And true, she was part of something pretty iconic in being with Star Wars, but I think that what we have to thank for the indelible mark that she's left on us is the fact that she was always so open and so giving of herself, especially when it came to things that people would perceive as weaknesses, like mental illness and like the fact that she struggled with drug addiction, which was largely related to the mental illness portion of her life. And also just navigating not only being a woman in Hollywood, but being a woman, period. And so I think for a lot of fans, whether you're a Gen Xer like me and first encountered Carrie in 1977 in the first Star Wars movie and grew up looking to Princess Leia as an example, as a role model, on down to millennials and whatever they're calling the generation after them, who are only just now discovering this because of The Force Awakens. I think that she has interacted with fandom differently than a lot of celebrities because she's tweeted with them and at them, and her fans were calling her Space Mom there at the end, and it's adorable and sweet, and she embraced that and she adopted that. So I think that in Carrie's case, fandom grief is going to play out differently than it has in ways that we've encountered before.
Well, also being very, very open about her struggles is huge, because people, in the public eye still aren't terribly open about that. I mean, it was pretty damn shocking. I want to say 76 when Betty Ford, when that started to come out, that that there are people who need help and treatment, and that they were going to, and that she was going to have a center, and that was what was her cause, what was important to her, that wasn't being swept under the rug quite as much, was revelation. And I mean, we see actors and actresses now who are, or any other public figure who seem to have problems with alcohol or drugs, and they aren't open about it. And, these days we are much more privy to their inner lives because we see a lot more of them. We have much more of a 24-hour news cycle about them as well as everything else.
Exactly. So I think Carrie's openness just kind of helped us to feel like we actually know her, so that it was more like losing a friend or a family member than some celebrity that kind of made some generic tweets every so often. The openness has definitely made a huge difference. And when you talked about Betty Ford, that also sparked another connection in my head. Back in the 60s or late 50s, Bela Lugosi was arguably the first celebrity to openly go to rehab. The newspapers, the tabloids were there when he was getting released. If you go to YouTube, there's actually a link, one of his last interviews right after he got out of rehab, and he talks about that a little bit. That was so unusual back then, but Bela is still very popular, very iconic in the horror movie scene. And if you're familiar with the movie Ed Wood, I guess there was some tension. I don't know how much this was played up for the film, but there was tension between Bela and Boris Karloff. Boris Karloff was more popular than Bela for the longest time, and Bela is now arguably more popular. His stuff sells more, that kind of thing. So I think, again, his openness and his honesty about his struggle and sharing that with people might have made a bit of a difference in how people perceive him now, and his persistence and popularity, even though he died so long ago.
That there's reality behind the facade that so many people in the public eye can't show, or they think they can't show, or that they think they're going to lose money if they show.
Yeah, and Carrie just kind of taught us how to own whatever's going on with us, and that's something that she's been very clear about ever since she wrote Postcards from the Edge, which came, I think, in 88, 89, somewhere around in there. She just put it out there and owned it, and she was very vocal about the fact that if she does that and if she owns it, she's got control over it. Whereas if she tries to keep it a secret, tries to hide things, and then somebody gets a hold of it and some icky tabloid reports it or whatever, then she does not have control of it, and she doesn't have control over the narrative that goes with it. And I just think that it was just something that we've never really seen before, and just so very refreshing.
Yeah, and it's certainly smart to own that, because you're right that the tabloids are going to be there no matter what. So you can either hide from what you are and let them, kind of carry on their little whisper game campaign against you, or you can own who you are, be upfront about it, and say, yeah, I messed up. Yeah, this exists about me. This is my reality. And then that turns it on its head. And what they report about you cannot hurt you, or at least can't hurt you in a way that it would if you were in denial.
Yeah, so it's fair to say that her popularity is probably going to endure for such a long time, and beyond the fact that she was on Star Wars. There have been a lot of lovely tributes coming out of the internet from journalists, but we'll share a few of those with you, as well as the fans continuing to celebrate her, and a lot of them paid tribute to her on the internet in the days surrounding the anniversary of her death. So we'll share some of that with you, and you can check that out on the blog.
See, now, what I also think about Carrie Fisher is I also think about her in When Harry Met Sally.
Yes. One of the few roles that people think about besides Princess Leia is When Harry Met Sally.
For those who don't know the movie, or maybe can't, or maybe it's been a while, she's kind of a sidekick character, but the sidekick characters have much better relationship than the main characters do. Much more intelligent and mature one.
Absolutely. And another role of hers that I really, really liked was The Burbs, which she plays Tom Hanks's wife.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those movies that's just so funny. I never get tired of it, especially the way it just pokes holes in conformity and the underbelly of suburbia. But Carrie was just great in it. She's great in everything she does. I think that her greatest performance was her last in The Last Jedi, and it's just really a shame that we lost her when we did, because I feel like, she was on another upswing as far as her career goes. The Last Jedi probably would have gotten her a lot more offers. Not that she needed them, but I'm sure people would have been, just trying to beat her door down to get her on their projects.
So let's talk about the movie.
Let's talk about the movie. Did you see the movie, Janet?
I have not seen the movie, but I have no problem with spoilers, so go for it.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, listeners. You know my stance on spoilers. I'm going to not really hold back too many things here. So if you haven't seen The Last Jedi yet, you might want to stop listening. But for the rest of you who have or who don't care, let's dig in. So, as I was saying, one of the highlights of this film is that it's Carrie Fisher's final performance, and arguably one of her best ones. Just some of the best acting she's done in a long time, and this is the Leia that we kind of always assumed was there, but never shown on the screen. And what I mean by that is when we look at the original trilogy, we see her as this icon of strength and virtue. But if we really think about it, compared to the male characters surrounding her, Leia does not really have as much growth and personal change by the time it's over as Luke Skywalker does or as Han Solo does. And what changes she does go through, they're defined by the men that surround her. So by the end of Return of the Jedi, she's Darth Vader's daughter, she's Luke's sister, and she's Han's girlfriend. And really not much else has changed for her. So in The Last Jedi, just to see her actualized this way was just a happy thing for me. Mark Hamill, again, doing some of his best acting ever. Now, the people who have followed his career loyally over the years, they've had a chance to see his range if they saw him in Amadeus on stage, or if they follow his voice work. He's arguably the best Joker. Fight me. He's the best Joker ever. So the character direction, and we'll get into this a little bit in just a moment, the character direction they took with Luke Skywalker exposes Star Wars fans to more of that range that Mark Hamill has and more of his talent. So I was blown away by him in this movie. The Porgs, the little furry kind of penguin-y creatures, everybody was expecting them to be the new Ewok and just there for a marketing ploy and just really, really annoying. And they weren't annoying at all. In fact, they were really good. And there was a logical reason for them to be in this movie. And it's because they filmed Luke Skywalker scenes on location in an island in Ireland. And so the island is also a sanctuary for those puffins, those white birds.
Oh, yeah, well,
yeah. So you can't tell the puffins to go away because you're shooting. So right. So they had to cover up the puffins somehow, and that's how the Porgs came to be. I thought it was genius. I thought it was good.
That is a very smart idea. I mean, because because if you can't get rid of them, then all you're doing is CGIing them out, which is probably a hell of a lot more costly than just slapping something on them and saying, "Ooh, look, aliens."
Right, or just kind of trying to explain why the galaxy far, far away also has puffins.
Space puffins.
Space puffins, right. So as a lot of you know, and we'll get to this in just a moment, the movie's been kind of polarizing in the fandom, but I just kind of wanted to start this by way of saying what I loved about the movie. And I love that it undermined a lot of your assumptions going in, and it undermined the assumption that Leia never pursued Jedi training. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit in just a moment. The humor in the movie was great. It's also one of those polarizing things about it. You're either on board with it or you're not, but if you're willing to just kind of roll with it, it's pretty good. There's a wonderful scene where R2 engages in some emotional blackmail against Luke Skywalker, and he does so by shooting the hologram of Leia that starts this whole thing, the whole "Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope" thing. And so he uses this as leverage to get Luke to do something, and the scene just plays so beautifully, and Luke calls it out as a cheap shot, and it is, but we love R2 for taking it. It's just so great. This movie is so feminist. It's not even funny. Women are getting it done in this movie, and in fact, there's an article that we'll share with you, and I agree with it completely. The real villain in The Last Jedi is toxic masculinity. And yeah. So it's just, you've got the women in the leadership roles just taking care of business, and the women not in the leadership roles in the trenches, they're taking care of things too. Lots of heroic women without being, oh look, we're women and heroes. Like, they're just being competent women doing their jobs, and it's just a beautiful thing. Yoda comes back to us. So we've got Force Ghost Yoda, and instead of that awful CGI that they did in the prequels, we have Puppet Yoda back. And it's just so beautiful to see those scenes between Yoda and Luke recalling back to The Empire Strikes Back, and it works so well because there's actually a puppet in the frame for Mark Hamill to interact with. So it just plays so beautifully. I was touched that, aside from seeing Carrie again, this was one of the scenes where I just really, really teared up because it was beautiful. Yeah. So, I mean, it just kind of, there was some, comfort, familiarity, like with Yoda, but just, if you were married to some of your fan theories, you were in for a loop. And obviously, for some people, setting themselves up for disappointment. So, have you heard much about the backlash against The Last Jedi?
Some. I mean, I know that similar to some of the backlash against Discovery is that there's sort of a feeling, I think, for some people that some of the that some boxes were getting checked off, particularly with Rose.
Yeah, that's a little bit of it. One of the things that I want to point out is, unlike a lot of situations, the backlash against the movie is really complex, and it's coming from a lot of different places for a lot of different reasons. So I'm going to kind of go through some of the common criticisms here. I'll start with the ones that seem more legit to begin with, and then I'll kind of end on the things that are just sort of fandom butthurt. So we'll share with you a couple of articles that sum up the points of contention. There's particularly a nice one from Vox that sums up the controversy in the different places that it comes from quite nicely. And there's one also that's a good defense of The Last Jedi from Slash Film, and it's basically about how Rian Johnson is kind of like tearing down Star Wars in order to bring it back up, which is a really simplistic and unnuanced way to explain it. But when you think about how these films are about the baton being passed from George Lucas to Disney and from the original cast to this new cast, it makes a certain kind of sense to me. So I'm on board with Rian Johnson and everything that he did. One of the most common criticisms is Luke's characterization, which I'm praising because, again, it gives Mark Hamill this vehicle to show much more of what he's capable of than we've seen in the Star Wars films. He's kind of broken. He's kind of dark. When we left him in The Force Awakens, Rey just found him. He's been hiding out on this island all by himself. Leia couldn't find him. So we know that he's been intentionally hiding. A lot of people are contesting that, saying, well, if he was responsible for Kylo Ren, he should have stayed, he should have fought. But they're forgetting that Obi-Wan Kenobi was hiding in the desert of Tatooine and that Yoda was hiding on Dagobah. So
It's
yeah,
just what you do.
right. Well, and if you can't fight, you lay low. And another difference between Luke's film and Ben Kenobi and Yoda is that Kenobi and Yoda knew that baby Luke and baby Leia were going to grow up someday and maybe be the people who could turn the tide with what was happening in the galaxy and in the Force. They had hope. Luke had no such person that he knew was coming, and he had closed himself off from the Force in order to hide. So Rey wasn't even on his radar. He didn't even know anything about her until she showed up with his lightsaber. So yeah, it would make sense that Luke would get kind of broken and kind of embittered and kind of feel like he's not welcome or isn't fit to be around people, isn't fit to train Jedi, that kind of thing. I thought that the plot line made sense. Part of what happened, though, is that Mark Hamill himself kind of inadvertently spoiled the milk and sort of set things up for the haters to pounce on, because he was initially critical, and publicly so, about some of the choices Rian Johnson made in terms of Luke's character direction. He's since walked those back, and some of the things that fans have taken and run with, they have exaggerated. Others, Mark Hamill is saying that he's regretted saying them. So, and that kind of makes sense too. Like, I mean, it kind of surprised me that he would be so public anyway, because to me that kind of comes across as like biting the hand that feeds you. But that said, it was there, it's out, it happened. But the guy is entitled to change his mind, and a lot of fans just aren't accepting that. They're saying that he sold out, that kind of thing. So he regrets it. Unfortunately, the fandom just isn't letting go.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of folks who sort of have this concept that, oh yeah, he should be the same that he was in Return of the Jedi, and which I always want to call Revenge of the Jedi, I might add, because I know that was the original name of it. But anyway, that they sort of want him to be that way. So, but he's not the ingenue. He hasn't been the ingenue for 2 decades or more, and he shouldn't be. Why shouldn't he be changed by what happened to him? Why shouldn't he be embittered by the fact that, he thought that everything had been hunky-dory and they had kind of fixed everything, and now it's all gone to pot again?
Yeah, and, I'm not the same person I was 30 years ago. I think any of us tries to make the claim that we're lying. I think that the main argument that some fans feel supports that he should be the same is that Star Wars is a fairy tale, it's a fantasy, and they want everything to be all nice and good and whatever. And, it just like with The Empire Strikes Back, it was the middle movement of that trilogy. The second trilogy tends to be, or the second piece of the trilogy tends to be darker. And so we've got that dark piece. And I think that fans just had certain assumptions, and when you have your heels dug into those assumptions and you don't leave room for other possibilities, I think that you set yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that the second of the trilogy is the dark one, of course, makes sense, because in the first part of the trilogy, it's your setup, you're getting everything together, the team assembles kind of thing. In the last one is where there's the wrap up, there's the upshot, and everything has to tie up somehow, whether it's that you leave bodies everywhere, or everybody gets married, or they all run off into the sunset, or whatever. And so something has to happen in the middle. There has to be some meat in that sandwich, and that's and very often that is where a writer is going to go darker, because there has to be a reason for the third piece of a trilogy.
Yeah, and you can hang the 3 pieces of a trilogy on the same structure that's a 3-act structure for a film. And your second act of a film is where the conflict comes in, and you have these reversals of fortune that happen, and the obstacles and everything. So of course that's where all the dark things are going to happen. It's not always going to go well for everybody, because if it did, there wouldn't be a movie. It would be boring as heck. It would be made for 6-year-olds. That's not really what Star Wars should be, I think. If you want that, they've got plenty of Star Wars cartoons. But as for the middle part of a trilogy, I have no problem with Dark Luke. I really don't. He didn't go to the dark side. He's not evil. He's just dealing with some choices that he made, and he's dealing with what he perceives to be the consequences of those choices.
Yeah, he's and he's reacting to what's happening, which is of course he should be doing that. It's if you're watching this and thinking that he shouldn't have reactions to what's going on, then if the character doesn't have reactions to what's going on, then the character isn't necessary.
Yeah, and I just feel like the idea that he wouldn't be broken and upset is simplistic and reductive. That's just kind of my take on that.
Yeah, he had to have changed, because he's not. Mark Hamill as a person isn't what he was, of course not, and I think it also plays very well to who he is as a human being, as a real person, not just as a character, but the actor himself. That his look changed considerably when he was in a pretty bad car accident, and it's been several years. He's older, he's weathered, and so he should be maybe a little sardonic about things, maybe a little cynical. He's not the hopeful farm boy. He hasn't been the hopeful farm boy in years. He should look that way, that he's not.
Yeah, and just to inject a little personal experience into this, I've always been, people would look at me and guess me as younger than I am. And a lot of that is just probably because I am the most immature person my age out there anyway. So a lot of that has to do with behavior. But people don't guess me for considerably younger anymore. And one of my friends said it's because I'm finally at that age where I have that look in my eye like I hate everything.
Well, yeah, I've got the look in my eye that's I can't be bothered with your nonsense kind of thing.
Yeah, so nobody's guessing me as, 10 to 15 years younger than I am, like they did when I was in my 30s. It's kind of, they still guess me as younger, but it's closer to, 5 years younger than I actually am. So, you live a life, it starts to show. I'm sorry.
And it should. It should, because we're all defined by our experiences. And if a character who's older is not defined by their experiences, then that character's not realistic.
Right. So I'm going to hang on that word realistic there and kind of move on to the next criticism that I wanted to talk about of the film. And there's a scene kind of early on in the movie where a ship gets blown up, Leia's ship, and she gets sucked out into vacuum. Now, for those of us who went to the theater knowing full well that Carrie Fisher died in real life and that, Leia was so important to us, to see this happen so early in the film, there was just this collective gasp, especially the first time I saw the movie in the theater, and everybody was wondering oh my God, is this it? Is this it? And then logic kind of takes over, because we heard Rian Johnson and JJ say things like the third movie, Leia was supposed to be very, very important right around the time Carrie died. So this can't possibly be it. And we see her reach out through the Force, and because Leia is always having to do this, she facilitates her own rescue by Force pulling herself back to the ship where Poe and other people see her, and so they go rushing to the airlock to let her in, so she doesn't die. And of course she's screwed up and in a coma for a while. She doesn't get out unscathed. It's not that unrealistic, but a lot of people had a problem with that.
Well, I think those people don't understand Star Wars because Star Wars is always, for the science fiction fantasy genre, Star Wars has always been more heavily on the fantasy side, and Star Trek has always been on more heavily on the science fiction side. You can't imagine. You once you know that as your background, then these things make sense. But that also means that these aren't really the best comparisons to each other.
Well, one of the things that I kind of agree with in terms of criticism is that the way it was done, it didn't look very realistic. In fact, she kind of looked like Mary Poppins flying through the air. You almost want to see like an umbrella in her hand when it happens. And when you brought up the comparison to Star Trek there, that jogged something in my memory. If you watch Star Trek Discovery, there's a Klingon ship. The outer hull is covered with sarcophagi. Is that the plural for sarcophagus?
Works for me. Sure. Coffins.
Okay.
Bunch of coffins.
Coffins. So in this scene, we learned that the Klingons collect their dead and honor them by making them part of the ship and all that kind of stuff. So we see these Klingon bodies floating in space, and then a tractor beam pulls them up. And there's just like a certain limpness to it, and then kind of like a jerk when the tractor beam grabs them, and they look like dead bodies in space. So I just kind of feel like, if Leia kind of like looked a little bit more like that, and then we saw that hand move and like reach out for the airlock, I think that fans would have less problems with that. To me, though, I think it's important nonetheless, because it operates to undermine the assumption that she never pursued Jedi training. And I'm going to talk about that one a little bit later, because that's actually going to relate to something else later on when we get to more of like the butthurt portion.
Well, there's all this time that comes in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. So why couldn't she be pursuing, force training? And in addition to raising Ben, who becomes evil.
Well, that's the thing, and I think a lot of people made that assumption because in the expanded universe novels, she didn't, and much beyond the basics, levitating rocks, this is how you use a lightsaber, that kind of thing. Also, I think that thing persisted in the novelization of The Force Awakens, which you can only go so far in your assumptions with it, because when writers do novelizations of the films, yeah, you're getting the stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor, but the author also has a little bit of latitude in terms of filling in the gaps. So we really don't know where that came from, if that was a product of the author's mind or if that was something that Lucasfilm had always intended or what. So I am kind of old school in that if it didn't happen on the screen, there's a possibility that it might not count.
Yeah, I'm on your page with that too. And this is not to diss tie-in writers, because they're fantastic, but this is something that actually Dayton Ward, who is a tie-in writer for Star Trek, had said, which was that first off, he kind of doesn't care about canon, but one of the things he had mentioned was that if there's a conflict between what happens on the screen versus what happens on the page, go with what's happening on the screen, because what they anticipate from what they write on the page isn't necessarily what the showrunner really wants to do, and they might go in that direction or they might not, and they shouldn't feel handcuffed to the stuff that's on the page, so that the casual fan also shouldn't feel that the stuff that comes on the screen should be should be dictated to by what happens on the page, and instead it should be a little bit more vice versa, actually.
Yeah, and as far as that goes, too, we should feel free to cherry pick it until it's contradicted on the screen, because the other thing in The Force Awakens that I do cling to for comfort is the fact that Han and Leia never actually got divorced. They just kind of were in this place where they didn't know how to talk to each other anymore. And the fact that they, nobody ever formalized the dissolution of their union means, to me at least, that they had some hope of a reconciliation later on. So, it's you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Again, something might come along later on to contradict that, but for now, I like it. It's comforting, and I'm going to keep it.
Go for it.
So moving along, another criticism had to do with the big Emperor bad Snoke. He's kind of the new Palpatine that came along, but in The Force Awakens, we were left with a lot of questions. Who was Snoke? Where did he come from? Again, a lot of assumptions, I think, came from the novelization, because they were talking about how Snoke was manipulating Ben Solo while Leia was pregnant with him. Creepy. Just creepy. So a lot of people had a lot of fan theories about who Snoke was. There was a theory that he was Tarkin reincarnated. There were theories that he was Darth Plagueis. I can't even remember how to say that. But just a lot of different ideas on who he could be. And so Kylo Ren kills him in The Last Jedi, and we never get these answers. And so a lot of fans are ticked off because they're confronted with the fact that they've invested all of this time and energy in speculating as to who Snoke was, and come to find out, Snoke does not matter.
And similar to that is Rey's parentage, which I gotta say I'm so happy about that she's not a member of this big clan.
You know what, though? And I was going to kind of save this for next month's episode, because, there's just, so much to, unpack here. I don't think what Kylo Ren told her disproves anything, because he's already got the view that his parents are trash. And what he says to her is the oldest trick in the book if you're a cult leader or a domestic abuser, which is, you are nothing without me. So I don't put a lot of stock into what he told her.
And that's very possible too, but I do like the concept of her not being, royal blood or something, something that was in her DNA or whatever, the alien version of that is, because then it makes you feel that there's more universality to it, because I think it's Kenobi who says this, that when he's asked what the Force is, he said, this is what happens all around us. So if it's something that's all around everybody, then potentially anybody could tap into it with the right training, or at least with the right motivation.
Well, and that's something that Luke says too, and that's one of the messages of the movie, is that part of where the Jedi went wrong is the idea that it could belong to any one person or any group of people, and that a lot of our assumptions about the Force are actually wrong. A lot of fans are taking offense to that as well. I'm just kind of thinking, though, in terms of story symmetry and stuff, and there's other things, textual evidence in The Force Awakens, and one that I cannot ignore is that when Rey and Leia, share this moment of grief over Han Solo, and they've never met each other before, and they hug, the musical motif playing underneath that is Han and Leia's love theme. And I'm thinking, if Rey isn't their kid, that's just weird and creepy, and I don't see JJ I'm on a first name basis with him, JJ Abrams or John Williams getting sloppy like that and making that kind of mistake. I just don't see it, and it runs counter to anything that I would have taught freshmen when I was teaching film appreciation. Everything that happens on the screen is intentional, so the love theme was purposeful. And so I don't know. That's just kind of where I'm coming from. I actually have an entire spreadsheet of evidence.
But I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, what you're saying is that everything on the screen is intentional, and that's exactly something that all of us as consumers of film in particular, or television for that matter, should be aware of. Is that there's a reason why a character wears a red shirt and not a blue one. There's a reason why a character is taller, has a beard, is eating oatmeal instead of bacon and eggs. There is a reason for all of this stuff, some of which might be budget, but there's always reasons. None of this stuff is ever by chance, ever haphazard.
Yeah, and I think that there's an argument too, just for the fact that we've still got one more movie to go. Like I can appreciate the fans who find it refreshing that maybe Rey isn't part of the Skywalker clan, but I also think that we're kind of fooling ourselves if we think that we have a definitive answer, because we still have one more movie to go.
And presumably that's the one that's going to tell it all, because otherwise they ain't got no more movies left.
Yeah, and a lot of the reviews that I'm reading are saying that, Rian Johnson has done something contrary to Abrams, and that, he's showing no interest in Abrams and his mystery box and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know, maybe this is the kind of misdirection that plays into the mystery box, and we'll finally have the solution with the third movie. I don't know. But to kind of bring this back to Snoke and the fact that he doesn't matter, and fans being upset with that, Snoke is what I would call, I think that he fits as a MacGuffin. And are you familiar with a MacGuffin?
Yeah, it's the red herring. It's the misdirection. Yeah. It's the thing that didn't matter.
It's the thing that didn't matter. So I'm going to name some classical moments from classic movies, kind of explain this concept. You ever see Psycho, Janet?
Hell yeah.
So for those of you who have not seen Psycho, and I'm talking about the original one, not the remake, because I haven't seen the remake, so I don't know if they did something different. Janet Leigh plays what we think is the protagonist. She's stolen a bunch of money, and she lands at the Bates Motel in order to hide out and kind of collect herself. And we know that she's stolen the money, and we think that the money is important. And then she decides to take a shower.
and so on and so forth.
Right. So the money didn't matter at all. The money is just what landed her in that time and place. The same thing could be said about the transit papers in Casablanca. Yes, they bring two people to town. They haunt Humphrey Bogart. They're one of them's from his past, a woman, a love affair. The love triangle is what's important, not the papers themselves. The papers are kind of what starts the thing, but the papers are not the payoff. And a little bit differently, you could even say Rosebud from Citizen Kane. Rosebud and the transit papers and Janet Leigh's money are the things that are driving character behavior, but they are not important to the plot.
Well, sometimes, what a writer will do is that they need something to set things up. They need a reason why X, Y, Z happens, and not even necessarily, what's called the inciting incident, but just there has to be some purpose behind why the character goes to Utah, why the character joins the army or whatever, that there should be something that starts it off, but that the thing that kicks off the reaction is not what's important. It's the whole reaction that's important.
Yes, and so in that way, Snoke really sort of fits the idea of a MacGuffin. So if you dislike Snoke being a MacGuffin, that's your prerogative. But if you're going to say that inherently makes the movie bad, get out your Ouija board and argue that with Alfred Hitchcock.
At the Magic 8 Ball, ask again later.
Right, exactly. Like I think Hitch would have appreciated the fact that this happened, but fans not so much. Yeah, one of the criticisms is coming from segment of fandom that's accusing Star Wars of queer baiting, and particularly with the Finn and Poe relationship, which the portmanteau for that is Stormtrooper and pilot. So here's the thing. Storm Pilot is pretty much completely an invention of the internet. There's really no textual evidence or even subtext, really, I would say, in the movie that says that, hey, these two could possibly hook up. Not like the two in Rogue One, which I think very definitely were a same-sex couple. Storm Pilot, on the other hand, pretty much was just born out of the fact that it was a possibility, but not a lot of strong support for it. And, I gotta say, I used to party at a lot of gay bars. I was a hairdresser for a number of years, so you kind of come into a lot of contact with the LGBTQ community when you do hair. And I work for a university, so again, a lot of LGBTQ community amongst my colleagues and my students. I like to think that my gaydar works pretty well. And I really just don't see a lot there in terms of Finn and Poe. But it was one of those things, though, that I didn't actively ship it, but if Lucasfilm went that way, I would have definitely supported it. So, it was just kind of one of those things where, like, I don't see the evidence, but it does exist as a possibility. So, hey, party on, rock on if you want to do that. I think it would be cool. So, it's not coming from the film, but rather the accusation is that the queer baiting seems to be coming more as a marketing strategy for the film. So when stars are asked about the possibility of the Storm Pilot relationship, Daisy Ridley has answered very coyly, will they or won't they kind of way. And people have taken John Boyega's remarks about, oh yeah, Poe, he's my boy, he's my dude, he's my man, to kind of be in support of that ship. Other things. Is that me? I hear a ringing.
Oh, that is me. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. A slight detour. That's okay. So, getting back to the queer baiting, J.J. Abrams has suggested that, yes, there is room for, LGBTQ characters and relationships in the galaxy far, far away. And Rian Johnson has tweeted a piece of Storm Pilot fan art, which the fandom was taken as not only approval of the relationship, but maybe like an acknowledgement that it was happening. So what the argument here is that Star Wars and Lucasfilm and Disney would have probably been better off if they had just been upfront and honest right away and said, hey, Storm Pilot isn't a thing. It's not going to happen. And then those fans wouldn't have felt so blindsided when, they see Rose express feelings for Finn. And people have been kind of disappointed that Lucasfilm took the heteronormative route.
Well, I think a lot of Storm Pilot is also a lot of wishful thinking. But that's sort of been, kind of been the modus operandi for a lot of these, where people see things that aren't necessarily there because they see what they want to say.
Yeah, on the other hand, though, like with Finn and Poe, though, like if we just take The Force Awakens in isolation, there wasn't anything there that says it wasn't going to happen either. Like if we go back and the people who would slash Han Solo and Luke Skywalker together, it's like, okay, well, they were both, before Luke knew that Leia was his sister, they were both expressing romantic interest in her. And of course, back then, we didn't really think much in terms of people who were bisexual or pansexual or gender nonconforming back then. But textually, what we had were two men showing interest in a woman. So at least that would kind of say, okay, well, that establishes a pattern of behavior. And because both Finn and Poe were pretty platonic with the women in the movie, that did open up the possibility, I think, for either one of them to be interested in the same sex, and maybe even end up together eventually. So while it was wishful thinking, I think that it was maybe not in the face of contrary evidence, if that makes sense.
Well, they didn't have anything that was that said no, it's not.
Right, exactly. So the other side of this, though, that I'm kind of looking at is like, well, what would the consequences have been if everyone from Lucasfilm on down to Abrams and Johnson and the stars, if they were upfront about Finn and Poe not being a thing? Then, I kind of feel like the same segment of the fandom might have felt excluded then and alienated then, and then we would be having a different conversation, but for the same reason. So, I can kind of maybe sympathize with Lucasfilm's side of this thing by saying, well, we don't want to exclude anybody, but we also don't want them to get mad about something that they haven't seen yet.
Yeah, well, and in the meantime, we don't want to exclude them because they buy tickets too.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's really what it comes down to. So, I kind of feel like that there's no good way that they could have answered the question or reacted to it. I think that, being upfront would have been a little bit more transparent, but I could see why maybe people are upset, feeling like, okay, people have been hinting that, yeah, okay, maybe it is a thing. It sort of seems similar to me the way David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson play up the fact that a lot of people in the X-Files fandom real life ship them and have these theories about Duchovny and Anderson being involved in an off-screen romance. And then that segment of the fandom is called the Jalovnies, Gillian and Duchovny. Yeah. So, why... I mean, it hits a personal squick for me because it's like shipping real people is kind of uncomfortable for me, because it just kind of seems to invade privacy and that kind of thing. But I think that there's a bit of it that's more acceptable because it's also heteronormative. So people aren't quite so upset, when they aren't really dating. A more apt comparison might be if people watch Once Upon a Time, they might be familiar with this. And I don't watch it, but this is something that I came across in my research for my dissertation. The Swan Queen ship. It's a same-sex, female-female relationship that a segment of the Once Upon a Time fandom ships. It's not canonical, it's not on the screen, but they want Swan Queen to happen. And I don't know anything about these characters. I think one's a swan, I think one's a queen, I don't know. But
the hell if I know.
Right. I don't watch this show, I probably should. But they've been known to contact the showrunners and do anything from ask nicely to like send kind of like overbearing and threatening messages about why Swan Queen should be a thing. And they put it forward as this political thing that there needs to be more LGBTQ representation, particularly healthy lesbian ships. But the other segments of the fandom kind of feel like, well, it would be one thing to ask them for more LGBTQ representation, but the fact that it always has to be Swan Queen suggests to the rest of the fandom that it's more about furthering what they perceive to be a crack ship than it is about anything, any meaningful political change. So there's this schism in the fandom. And so I kind of feel like the accusation of queer baiting is maybe not quite as severe as what happened with Swan Queen, but just this idea that like, hey, definitely send the message to J.J. Abrams and Kathleen Kennedy and anybody else who matters at Lucasfilm and let them know that, hey, you want to see LGBTQ representation, but to specify that it needs to be these two specific characters, I think is just like a little presumptuous and telling the artist what to do.
Yeah, you're trying to dictate what goes on the screen, and that just ain't going to happen. It doesn't mean that creators do listen to their audiences, but it doesn't mean that they do what their audience wants.
Yeah, so I think that we've just gotten somehow we've gotten this idea that everything needs to be fan service, and it really doesn't. And egalitarian and fair is having positive LGBTQ characters and relationships shown on screen. Fan service is when it's the characters that you, the fan, decides should be doing this. And I don't think that the fans should have the necessarily the authority or the agency to demand specific characters be fit to that mold.
Well, and I hate to break it to a lot of fans, but very often what they want is not what serves the writing very well, doesn't necessarily serve the plot very well. Plus, there's a million other things that are going on behind the scenes that you don't even know about, whether it's that an actor is sick or that somebody is being recalcitrant when it comes to contract negotiations, or they can't get this location that they wanted, or whatever. There are all sorts of reasons why things are done, on screen and off screen, and fans are not privy to most of these things. They're looking at it with this very tiny lens. They're seeing exactly one tree, and the people who are writing and producing, they're the ones who are seeing that forest.
Exactly, and I couldn't agree with you more. And that also kind of relates to like the other what I would call major and legitimate criticism of the film, which has to do with like plot holes and character arcs. So certain things, when you really think about them, you kind of wonder, For example, Rey received some training from Luke, and I don't know, some people get the impression that it seems to take months. I didn't get that impression, but some people did. While everything else only seems to take hours. And I'd like to remind everybody that we've been here before with The Empire Strikes Back. Luke was getting all of this training on Dagobah from Yoda, while Han and Leia and Chewie were limping without hyperdrive from, losing the Imperials at the asteroid belt, trying to make it to Lando and Bespin. So, you get the impression that Luke's training is taking a long time, but when you think about the Millennium Falcon without hyperdrive and that they're doing, interstellar travel, trying to make it to the next system, I mean, at sublight speeds, that should take, I don't know, centuries.
Yeah.
Work that out. You've got that ship, it's got probably limited supplies in terms of food. Leia's literally only got the clothes on her back that she escaped Hoth with, and somewhere in there she and Han Solo have found time to fall in love and all that kind of stuff. So we've had to reconcile these time differences before. So at least in the Han and Leia fandom, we kind of can see that, okay, maybe those events from the evacuation of Hoth to everything that went down in Bespin, maybe 6 weeks. So that way Luke could kind of maybe seem legit with everything that he learned, but Han, Leia, and Chewie didn't starve to death trying to get to Bespin. In fact, one of the in the Han and Leia fandom, there's this infamous, and I mean this in a good way, story by a fan author named Leela Starsky called 40 Days to Bespin. And let me tell you, this was like the best mommy porn ever. Like forget 50 Shades. Forget 50 Shades. This was X-rated, but with a plot and like the emotion stuff. But it also had the distinction of Leela Starsky was a very talented artist and illustrator, so it was also illustrated, let me tell you. So definitely a warm room when you read her stuff. But it kind of, among Han and Leia fans, though, because of the story, it just sort of became this shared headcanon among Han Leia fans that we can work with about a month and a half. That seems about right. So, just to say, to trash the Last Jedi for this kind of inconsistency, let's think about what came before. We've had to deal with this thing. This is not new. There's also a part where Finn and Rose go to this casino city, Catobite, and the whole part didn't really seem to fit into the second act. A lot of people say that it was unnecessary. It just kind of dragged the film down, and that it was the reason that the film was 2.5 hours and it doesn't need to be that long. But as some other critics are saying, though, it all kind of comes together in the third act. And so a lot of the things that people are complaining about in terms of plot and character, it's because they weren't meant to fit until things kind of come to a head at the end. And, that can be kind of taxing and exhausting on a viewer. But I think that a lot of the things that are plot holes and, quote, character problems are arguable. I think a lot of the things have been resolved inside the film if you really think about it. But what we've ended up with, and this will kind of make the turn into fandom butthurt here, you've got fans tweeting and posting angrily as though they speak for the entire fandom about how much this movie sucks. And number one, you don't speak for the whole fandom. And number two, the movie does not suck. You're not liking something that they did doesn't make it a bad movie. What it makes it is not the thing that you wanted to happen.
Oh, well, and fans never ever do that, where they think that what they like or don't like is representative of every single other person ever in the entire fandom.
Yeah, and I think that when you're tweeting at showrunners and producers and directors, I think that somehow people get it in their heads. We've made the mistake of telling people, probably when we taught them how to write business letters in English class or in high school or whatever, that statistically, for every one person who makes a complaint, 100 other people feel that way. There's this perception out there. So people kind of get into this thing where they think that they have more authority if they speak as though they're speaking for other people as well. And what that really does actually is undermine what you're trying to do, because the person that you're writing to can recognize that you're kind of overinflating your sense of power there.
Yeah, there's a thought that they've got an authority that they don't have is troubling. But there are I think a lot of folks feel that way because they want to feel that they're the thought leader on something or other, and that obviously they're right, and everybody's going to agree with them.
Yeah, and it's just not true. So, anecdotally, a couple of things that I've been running into, just in my own social media accounts, and I'm not really providing any links to this because I don't want to call out specific individuals, but, if you just bust open Tumblr or Twitter, you'll find it. There's this overwhelming sentiment of just because it's old doesn't mean that we need to change it, that we need to reinvent it, and, that if you wanted to do something new, then you should do your own new thing. But we've said this before about Star Trek Discovery. The franchise's survival doesn't depend on older films. It depends on younger fans assimilating it the same way we did and buying stuff for the next 40 years and that kind of thing. So, we're not really the ones that need to be satisfied here. And there's going to be a rude awakening for some people. But this is true. Another thing that I saw happening on Tumblr a couple of times is an accusation that Rian Johnson is a racist. What? And yeah, I know that was my reaction too. And the reason cited for this is, so we know Rose, she's the Asian character. Her sister dies earlier in the film, so it supposedly is like this dead Asian trope. She just exists to die. Also, later on, when Finn and Rose are captured by the First Order, forced to kneel before fascists. And So I'm kind of like looking at this stuff, and they say that Poe has been reduced to the hot-headed Latino guy. Now, getting back to Finn and Rose kneeling before the First Order, my reaction is this, and granted, I have this situatedness as a white woman, so I do enjoy a certain amount of privilege there, and there are certain things that maybe I haven't had to think about, but I do have to ask the question, is this not maybe what happens when you racially diversify your main cast, and your bad guys have been established to have been modeled on the Nazis and the fascists of World War II, and you're showing fascists behaving like fascists?
Which is what they're supposed to be behaving. But I can sort of, in a very, very roundabout way, I can kind of see their point, because these are, John Boyega is a person of color, and I don't know the actress's name who plays Rose, but she's Asian, that they're the ones who are kneeling as opposed to Rey, who's white.
And I get that, but I also think, though, that if the cast was not multicultural, and granted, there is a division here, like the good guys are multicultural, whereas the bad guys, just like in 1977, there's an awful lot of white faces in the bad guys. So I kind of think that, number one, it would weaken the statement. This is not shown as a good thing. It's not depicted as glorifying fascism. It definitely comes across on the screen that this is a very bad thing that's happening, and we should be mad that it happened. So if we had a white character, then I think that it doesn't stop being problematic. It just starts being problematic because you have a white good guy cast that is not racially diversified.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. What about the petitions? That was wacky, as far as I was concerned.
That is whack. So there's all these crazy petitions out there. A couple of them want The Last Jedi removed from canon, or one demands that they reshoot The Last Jedi. And I'm like, oh my god, if you knew how much time and effort it took to make a movie, I don't know. I would hope that these were tongue-in-cheek, but a lot of them aren't. And in fact, one petition's originator has already walked it back by saying that he acknowledges that it was a bad idea to start the petition. He blames it on a recent surgery or injury or something, and he was on a lot of painkillers and disappointed with the movie, and just, in his painkiller fog, not handling it very well. So he immediately ran out and made the petition. So yeah, not really the best way to deal with your disappointment. Pushing it harder, Rian Johnson has been getting death threats.
That's horrible.
That is very horrible. None of the articles out there go into much detail, which, I don't know. If I was Rian Johnson, I might not want much detail either, because it would just give the people doing it a lot more attention than they deserve. But there are a couple of articles out there that do mention that it's happened. And then, you've got your usual mix of men's rights groups and the alt-right, claiming that, again, the film is pushing a social justice agenda, so again, issues surrounding the multicultural cast, and even some alt-right whack jobs who are claiming credit for tanking the fan ratings at Rotten Tomatoes, and causing that disparity between critics and fans, because critics are raving about it, but the fan rating is somewhere just over 50%.
Yeah, well, and there's a similar crowd who are trying to tank the ratings for Discovery. That seems to be the modus operandi of a lot of people, is that if they don't like something, they're going to make sure that nobody else can enjoy it.
Yeah, and again, that idea that they should be able to speak for everybody, and that they're the ones that are right, and whatever happens, if you don't like it, don't watch it.
Yeah, don't you have other things in your life you could be watching or doing? Isn't there something else in the great panoply of human experience that maybe you could be spending your time on?
Apparently not, because I get the feeling that they wouldn't know what the word panoply means anyway. But
Peloponnesian War, look it up.
So all of this is kind of culminating in the perception that the Last Jedi is failing at the box office and that it's flopping because it has not made as much money as The Force Awakens. But as of New Year's Eve, it was up to 1 billion worldwide, which is not shabby at all. So just because it didn't make as much doesn't mean that it's failing. And again, just to kind of say that the franchise has been here before, Empire Strikes Back is arguably the best film out of the original trilogy, and we kind of regard it that way now. But back then, it had the weakest opening box office of the original trilogy. Critics didn't get it at the time. There was just, the reaction kind of wasn't as strong as it is today, but then, most people, it would occur to them to be jerks. And
they couldn't be, in quite such an easy way as you can be now.
Right, but one of the articles, though, does kind of do the same thing in terms of it looks at the fan reactions from letters to the editor in Starlog magazine, which basically was kind of functioning as the internet is now. Granted, they would only post so many of them, but the reactions were kind of similar to The Last Jedi in terms of people complaining about characterization not being consistent and supposed plot holes and things of that. So the more things have changed, the more they stay the same. So I don't know. I'm kind of thinking that we're going to remember The Last Jedi as like this really daring thing that ended up paying off. Right now, I think it's just too fresh. It's too new. And, the people who are disappointed, the sting hasn't quite worn off. But critics and fans alike, just kind of were both hot and cold with The Empire Strikes Back. And, now we think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. So there you go.
Yeah, it's maybe give it a little bit of time. I think that the other thing with Last Jedi is that the way that it was written and the way that it was executed gives writers way more outs, way more ways to develop it and to put in the final upshot of this great saga. Because if everything had been more or less the same, then you'd be going into writers would be going into this last movie thinking, okay, what do we do now?
Yeah, and I think that if you keep everything more or less the same, then it's like, why even have a writer? Just give a chimp a typewriter. Seriously, because if you're gonna do the same old cookie cutter thing, that's boring, and anybody could do that. A lot of fan writers out there have, spent a lot of time into trying to stylistically evoke what we saw on the screen. So there's a lot of talent out there that could do that if it was a matter of that. I think Rian Johnson made some daring moves in terms of trying to give us substance. And I gotta tell you, I would have maybe been upset about some of these things back in the day when I was 14. And I remember even in my late 20s, early 30s, saying some pretty unkind things about the expanded universe novels, especially because, as a Han and Leia fan, I was with the rest of the fandom there in terms of feeling like we were being excluded. They were, undermining Han and Leia's relationship, not quite the way they did in The Force Awakens, but I think that the expanded universe sort of desensitized me to that because, for a long time, I don't know if you know, but in the novels they killed Chewbacca, which kind of yeah, and so it just sort of created this big problem in Han and Leia's marriage, and so he was, he became the drunk loner, and she became the ice princess who retreated into her work, and there's some of those implications in The Force Awakens. So, but as a Han and Leia fan back then, it was extremely unsatisfying, and in fact, it kind of felt like the people who were in charge of the novels were deliberately trying to hurt us and tell us to bug off, because they were more focused on Luke and this original character Mara Jade and all this kind of stuff, and we just felt left behind and left out. So I understand disappointment, I really do. So haters, send me letters if you think you have to. I get disappointment, but my point is that I eventually grew up and grew out of that. And so now when I see The Force Awakens and Han and Leia's marriage in a lot of trouble, if not over, and having lived a life and having had a couple of really crappy relationships myself, I can just kind of look at that and nod and go like, yeah, I get it. More about me than you ever wanted to know, but that's that's one of the things too. Like I do humanistic research. I'm a qualitative person, not a quantitative person. So a lot of my research involves the researcher being the research instrument. So I have to acknowledge my situatedness and my standpoint when I come at these things. And so that's my standpoint. I'm pushing 50 and I've lived a life and not all of it's been good. So I get it. And I don't necessarily need Star Wars to give me a pablum fantasy. It's nice to know that things sometimes happen to the characters that I can relate to.
Yeah, it's I think that a lot of viewers, a lot of audience has a tendency to want the happily ever after, the nothing bad could happen to our characters. This is our ship. These are our people, and that happens sometimes. So, people grow apart, or there's other reasons why things just don't work out.
Yeah, and I wrote a lot of those fanfics, right, where they lived happily ever after and everything worked out. And, the problems were these minor sitcom kind of problems that could be solved in a half an hour or in the space of a short story, whatever came first. But, when you're doing a big epic saga, perfect is a pretty boring place to be.
Agreed. And so viva la imperfection.
So I've talked like forever about The Last Jedi. I will say that there's a couple of things that I'm going to prepare for the next show, and maybe some of these extras that we do that I might talk about in a freestanding kind of way, because like I said at the top of this segment, there is so much to unpack, and so I kind of want to talk about Death of the Author a little bit. I kind of skipped that part here, but in terms of Leia and Jedi training, there's a Death of the Author thing that can kind of happen there, and also because it's been top of mind because of my prelim exams, maybe about the representation of women in the Star Wars saga.
Cool. So let's talk news.
News!
Oh my God, weird stuff going on. So, Elisa Schlesinger's Girls Only show got sued because a lawsuit over the quote-unquote war on men. This was reported in the Hollywood Reporter. Now, folks, I hate to break this to you, but there's no right to entertainment.
You mean there's not?
Well, the whole life, liberty, pursuit of happiness thing. Yeah, that's not the law. Okay. That's not it. There's, so if men are excluded from a showing of this woman's show or of anything else, it's not something that you want to sue over. Hey, knock yourself out, spend some money, put some bucks in some lawyer's pocket so that they can turn around and put some bucks into the pockets of people who sell Mercedes-Benzes. But, but that's about all that's going to happen from this, because courts are just in general not really that interested in carving out new rights. They're really, really not interested in carving out new rights for people. And unless there could be something proven in here that there was something going on beyond entertainment, Such as, for example, let's say there were a bunch of business deals that were happening during these shows that men were being excluded from. Then they'd really have a really, really good argument about this. But here, they just plain don't.
And this does go back to something that I brought up when we were talking about the sexual harassment, in that, you know, a lot of these arguments that come from men's rights groups or people who just are kind of generally uninformed and maybe don't give a lot of thought to feminism, you know, we have a lot of systemic misogyny in our culture right now. So culturally, when you exclude women, we have generations of inequality supporting that. When we exclude men from a show, this is not a cultural problem, and men are not being typically denied something. It's a whole different ball of wax if you're denying something to a historically oppressed class than if you're denying something to a historically privileged class.
Exactly, which is the same thing also with race as well. But I wanted to segue into a little bit of amusement before we wrap up. I'm going to mangle his last name, and I apologize in advance. Milo Yiannopoulos. So,
sure.
Okay, so we'll go with that. So this dude had been in he's a big Trumper. He's got other issues. He's a gay man, by the way. So there is a right to free speech. Okay, but there's no right to be a jerk, which is a nice word for that. So Mr. Yiannopoulos has been in court, and the details are lots of fun because, so here's the deal. He was offered an $80,000 advance. Actually, he received an $80,000 advance as a check was cashed from Simon & Schuster to write a book, to write his memoir, which was going to be called Dangerous. He apparently went the lazy route, copying and pasting a bunch of Reddit junk, and also failing to cite any of his quotes. But the last straw was the total hot mess of a manuscript, which we have and are going to link to in the show notes. And it defies description, let's put it that way. It has a misogynistic and racist asides peppered throughout it. The editor, this is actually the second editor on this, lost all objectivity by about the 20th comment and just sort of threw up their metaphorical hands. And I will read a little bit of this to you and you'll find this amusing, I hope. And so Simon & Schuster canceled the book deal, which was like for $250,000. Yiannopoulos sued them in New York Supreme Court for $10 million for breach of contract.
Ugh.
Now, I'll tell you, I suspect he'll win. By the way, it is breach. But I also know that courts often have a sense of humor on junk like this, and they'll probably just award him a buck. I'm looking at page 135 out of 267 pages. So here's the original quote. The original from the manuscript says, "And look at me too. Other than Trump, Farage, and possibly Ann Coulter, is there anyone in the English-speaking world that the mainstream media prefers to smear and misrepresent? I'm called a sexist, a misogynist, a racist, an Islamophobe, a transphobe, a homophobe, yes, really, a white nationalist, a white supremacist, a supervillain, an attention seeker, guilty, and every other nasty label you can imagine. And just look where it got me. A $250,000 book deal and my own tour bus. I really hope the mainstream media continues to try to destroy me. Keep it up, lads. I'm sure it'll work eventually. Any day now, believe in yourselves." That's his original writing.
Oh, God.
The editor went through this with a red pencil. First off said, okay, a $250,000 book deal and my own tour bus. The editor said, comment number 290, I might add, no more references to your book advance or the publishing process.
My God.
They crossed out the keep it up, lads. They crossed up the any day now, believe it in yourselves. I don't even know how to describe this. Actually, let me find something else which is also amusing.
Narcissistic, self-aggrandizing.
I got it for you. So, chapter 10, page 195. It's called, I kid you not, it's called Why Ugly People Hate Me.
Oh, dear God.
So the comment, which is comment number 416, says, delete entire chapter. The book is better overall without hitting these ugly people, quote unquote, notes in the other, without hitting these other ugly people notes in the other chapters, and better overall by deleting this one. Yeah. So, and then the following comment is, beauty regime moved to box at end of chapter after Nietzsche section.
Oh, God.
So he goes on and on in this chapter, which of course the editor wants completely ditched, where he's complaining about a woman who was overweight who was criticizing him. So of course he's all big on fat shaming. Lovely fat shaming in here. Including, I wish I could find this quickly, which I can't, but he says something about where all fat people want to do is drink milkshakes.
Well, this is true. I mean, as a fat woman, yes, all I want to do is drink milkshakes, but there is more to me than that, and I don't always drink milkshakes. Sometimes I drink beer.
You know, it brings the boys to the yard.
Oh,
quote,
my God, you win 2018 already.
Oh my God, on the first day, awesome. So here's what he really wrote. He said, the fat acceptance movement isn't what you think. It isn't about obese people accepting fat into their system by downing a milkshake every chance they get. Fat acceptance holds that overweight people are, like gays, quote, born that way, end quote, that is, genetically predisposed to be fat. There may be some truth to that. Okay, but the fat acceptance movement also bridges the fact-value gap, arguing that fat people should not be encouraged to improve their weight, and that any attempt to tell them the truth about their health and romantic prospects constitutes fat shaming. So, of course, the editor comments, comment number 428, this is not true. No one argues against the health issues. You know, and it also includes a little bit later, same paragraph, which the editor wisely, erased, which was, quote, this is Milo's quote, he wrote this, apparently the goal is to look homely even by lesbian standards, end quote.
Oh, God.
And so comment number 829 is, don't use lesbian as a slur. It goes on and on and on like this.
Yeah, and, I don't know, I've seen a lot of fat shaming also disguised as concern trolling, that this whole false concern for other people's health, and it's just a backhanded way of telling people that you think that they're crap. And so, I don't know, this guy just needs to go away. He just needs to sit down, take a seat, and fade into obscurity.
Yeah, certainly. Page 260 out of 267, so it's near the end. Simply put, when someone calls you names, as the left is so fond of doing, and so, of course, the editor, comment number 592 says, and as you do too, there is no need to be upset, ruffled, or apologetic. These are just outbursts of moral rage, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. If you make a point or reveal a fact and someone responds with cries of racist, sexist, homophobe, or any other ways that the left now spells, quote, heretic, end quote, just coolly respond with the now immortal phrase, not an argument. Comment number 593 from that poor editor. But what about when you call others names? As you have throughout the book, except where I have deleted. This is there's this incredible lack of self-awareness, I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah, it lacks self-awareness, it's tone deaf, it's hypocritical, and I mean, I would be very surprised if he sat down with a psychologist and the psychologist didn't walk away giving him a diagnosis of some kind of like a narcissistic personality disorder or something like that, because this is just crazy.
They're all wrong. No matter how visually appealing my face is, the alt-right joins campus crybabies, the morbidly obese, and the Muslim Brotherhood as one of the few groups in America that does not want me associated with them. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He goes on and on about how pretty he is, he thinks.
Well, and here's the thing, too, is that, movements like the alt-right grab hold of guys like this because, okay, so he is a gay man, so somehow that gives them legitimacy, right? And just because you can find the one gay guy who will say the things that you want them to say does not mean that they are correct, true, right, ethically sound, anything of that nature.
Yeah, exactly. That there's that he's thinking, or rather, what they're thinking is that he's giving them legitimacy, because then they can say, "Oh, well, we're not really homophobic. Look, this gay guy says everything's fine."
Well, and when the whole Confederate flag thing blew up a couple of years ago, I saw some, extreme right reporting in which. And it might have even come from Fox News as well. They found basically the one black man who was willing to say that he didn't have a problem with the Confederate flag being flown on government buildings. And so that was supposed to shoot down the whole argument that, hey, maybe we fetishized other people's pain and shouldn't fly this flag.
Yeah, it's the same thing with, any woman who supports Harvey Weinstein or anything like that. Oh, yeah, everything must be hunky-dory because we found this one counterexample.
Yeah. And hey, to break it to you folks, that's not a logically sound argument, and you're not doing yourself a favor by constructing such an argument. So anything else noteworthy from good old Milo, or is it just safe to say that it's a hot mess minus the hot?
Exactly. Page 238, paragraph heading, the fag bus rolls in.
Oh, God.
Imagine, if you would, a tour bus, like the ones rock stars and rappers have. Hold the image in your mind. A beautiful, sleek steel beast coated in black. Only the picture on the side isn't of a singer or supermodel. It's a giant picture of my face, staring directly at you, besides giant bold text that reads, Dangerous Faggot Tour. Well, the good thing is you don't have to imagine it because it's real. You can see a picture of it on the insert. Go on, take a look. Treat yourself.
Oh my God! I hope this is so wrong, but I kind of hope that thing gets tagged by gang graffiti. I know that I'm a bad person for thinking it, but
yeah,
I'll own it. Wow! Yeah, God! Just when you think it got the worst it could possibly get, there's. Wow, where do we start with the bad?
Yeah, he's talking about cutting him or thinking about cutting himself when he was a teenager. He says, obviously I never did it because I always knew I was too beautiful to spoil like that.
Oh, God. Wow.
Anyway, link will be on the show notes. Like I said, feel free to tear this apart because everybody else is. So he's just, loads of fun. I mean, the guy his 15 minutes were up quite a long time ago, and this unfortunately extends them to a certain extent, but in a good way because, man, does he look like an idiot.
How did he become a thing? Was he like a YouTube? Vlogger, how did it's sort of like the Kardashians, right? Like, where the hell did he come from, and why do we care? He
had something. Okay, according to Google, Milo Yiannopoulos is a British political commentator, publisher, celebrity, blogger, journalist, and author. He is a former senior editor for Breitbart News. He describes himself as a, quote, cultural libertarian, end quote.
Ugh. All right. Well, yeah.
So let's shift gears here, which is sad news, but also it's hopefully at least a little bit empowering. Is that Rosemarie had died a few days ago, and if you don't remember who this actress is, okay, so she started off as, she was called Baby Rosemarie, and she actually started off as a singer, and she was hired by Bugsy Siegel, the mobster, okay. And so she had a very long showbiz career, and she was tapped by Dick Van Dyke to be in the Dick Van Dyke Show, which ran from 1961 to 1965. Her character was based on Imogene Coca.
That I did not know.
Yeah, and so she's so if you've never seen the show, the Dick Van Dyke Show is groundbreaking because the main character, the protagonist, had a life both at home and at work. Whereas what you used to see, like Ozzie and Harriet, for example, you knew that Ozzie had a job, but you had no idea what he did. You never saw him go there. You never saw his work friends or anything like that. So in the Dick Van Dyke Show, he's got his work friends, he's got his neighbors who are his friends. So there's lots of people in his orbit, and she's one of them. So, and they are comedy writers for the Alan Brady Show. So there's her. So she plays Sally Rogers. Maury Amsterdam, who plays Buddy Sorrell, and Dick Van Dyke, who's and his character's name is Rob Petrie. The three of them are the writers for the show. Sally doesn't do their typing, doesn't get their coffee, doesn't get their dry cleaning. She's not married, although she's rather man crazy. She is looking for a husband. She presumably lives somewhere on her own. She pays her own bills, buys her own things, has her own life. In 1965.
That's just amazing. Like I was thinking too as you were talking that, another feminist icon, Mary Tyler Moore, also came out of that show. I don't think that she was. I can't really remember. It's been a long time since I've seen the Dick Van Dyke Show, so I'm not really sure about her character as Laura Petrie. But when the Dick Van Dyke Show ended, eventually, 69, 70, the Mary Tyler Moore Show started. She was a single woman who had her own life, paid her own bills, had her own job, that kind of thing. And so just that this show just gave birth to such icons of feminism is just amazing.
Consider Sally Rogers. She's before Mary Tyler Moore. She's before Anne Marie. That's Marlo Thomas's character in That Girl.
Yep.
And the thing about Anne Marie is that she was very defined by her relationships with her parents and with her fiance.
Oh yeah. So where Sally was single and maybe looking for some companionship, but she was just fine without them.
She's also an older woman. That's the other thing. Mary's 30. She says so in the pilot because Lou Grant actually asks her that. He shouldn't, but he does ask her that, and she does answer. Anne Marie certainly was super young. Sally wasn't, and so here is a not attractive woman also making it on her own.
Yeah, just very amazing and very different. And it's been a long time since I've seen the Dick Van Dyke Show, but I don't really recall her being the butt of jokes about that for too often.
I think,
if at all.
In general, she may have been the butt of a few jokes of, I'm like her being man crazy, which is sort of understandable that they would make those the jokes, because consider the time frame.
Right. But at the same time, though, like, I mean, I'm feeling that I'm really relating to Sally Rogers here in that, I am very single. I would like some companionship, but I'm not going to compromise. It's you can come along for the ride, my ride, kind of a thing. And if and I make jokes at my own expense about chasing boys or whatever, so it's kind of relatable. I feel it would be more devaluing if other people who were not in my inner circle made those kind of remarks. So again, it's something that I would have to watch the show again and see it contextually. But again, like you said too, for the early to mid 60s, very progressive.
According to IMDb, so I'm looking up the famous interesting quotes from Sally Rogers. So here's the scenario. Sally, Buddy, Rob, and Laura are staying in a haunted cabin, and all four of them are in the same bed because they're scared of the ghost. So Rob Petrie says, "It's been over 2 hours. Nothing strange or unusual has happened." And Sally responds, "Oh, really? What do you call 4 grown people sleeping in the same bed with their clothes on?"
Well, I gotta tell you, I do remember watching Dick Van Dyke reruns when I was a little kid. I mean, I'm what I call a syndication baby. I feel like I was here just in time for television's second golden age, in which all of these great shows were part of after school and weekend programming while I was growing up. And it's also a golden age because the game shows back then were awesome throughout the 70s. So I actually first encountered Rosemary on Hollywood Squares. She was a regular staple on that show.
Yes.
And she was just one of those characters like Paul Lynde that you just watched it because she was one of those people that you wanted to see what she was going to say next.
Yes, exactly, and yes, she was a staple of Hollywood Squares, just like Paul Lynde, and very similar. They had very similar roles on the show where they were the wisecracking people. Yeah.
So and their counterparts on Match Game were Brett and Charles, right?
Yes.
You watched Match Game for Brett and Charles and Richard Dawson. And in fact, if you were on the show, if you wanted to win, you picked Richard. So this was very much influential on me growing up, the sense of humor that I developed watching those kinds of shows. Also, though, people who know me also know that I'm kind of a super fan of the Monkees, and 2 of my favorite episodes, Rosemary guest starred on. So she's made a contribution to one of my all-time favorite television shows outside of anything sci-fi or fantasy. So she's been kind of this big part of the things that I love the most.
She had a career stretching 90 years, according to IMDb. Her debut was as herself in a Vitaphone musical short that appeared on the bill with the jazz singer at its premiere in 1927.
Wow, that's just so amazing.
That is the entire that's beyond television. That's talkies to now. That's everything. That's amazing. So
yeah, we obviously lost a lot when we lost Rosemary, and I definitely am going to be looking more into her career, especially now that we've had this conversation about her contributions to feminism, and I just think that she's so darn interesting.
Certainly, and man, the things you must have seen. So, more news. Season 4 of Black Mirror started on December 29th. Have you been watching this?
Oh, God. So I binged it yesterday instead of working on syllabi. and so, well, it's okay. So seasons of Black Mirror are pretty short. I didn't count episodes, but I kind of feel like this one might be a little bit shorter than the other ones. But God, it just makes up for it in quality. So yeah, I've watched the entire season yesterday.
Oh, woo. So coming up next month, man, it is a good time to be a fan. Oh my God.
Yeah, so we've got the X-Files coming on January 3rd. The truth is out there, and we're about to find out what it is, where it is, and if you don't recall, and how could you not recall, season 10 ended 2 years ago with a heck of a cliffhanger, so we finally get to see that resolved, and I am so excited.
Yay. And on the 7th, so only a few days later, Discovery returns for the second chapter of the first season.
And I can't wait for that either. It's the only thing that's really kept me going and kept me from going completely crazy for more Star Trek Discovery is everything that's already been happening, what with The Last Jedi and Black Mirror. That's kind of sustained me for a little while. So I will be so happy to get back into that Star Trek Discovery groove. And I don't know, I don't want this to come off terribly unprofessional, but Jason Isaacs is my new Star Trek crush. I'm sorry,
God, yes.
Connor Trenier. Hey, fangirls gonna be fangirls. But no, I mean, I love Jason Isaacs on that show, and Lorca is just so mysterious and complex, and I just, I can't wait for more of him. He's so different from any captain we've had yet.
And, you know, going back to what we were talking about with Luke Skywalker and how he's changed over the years, there's a very real possibility that Lorca started off as somebody who was at least somewhat idealistic, but life has changed him.
Yeah, and I like where they're going to with the possibility of the PTSD character arc, but also kind of like how they keep you guessing, is it real, is it not? And is all this other stuff that he's maybe doing, is that real, or is it not, or is it just not what we think it is? What I find intriguing about him, though, is that he is a very good captain in that he knows how to motivate people, and he knows how to get them to perform, and I don't know, I just find it so darn interesting. Like, I cannot wait to see what's going to happen next with him.
Yeah, exactly. And so where do you think they are, by the way? For anybody who doesn't know, the season, the first half of the season ended with a cliffhanger where they were someplace where they could not locate where they were.
Yeah, so one of the popular fan theories out there is that they're in the mirror universe, which I think is possible. They could be, you know, another quadrant, beta quadrant, delta quadrant, some other quadrant, gamma quadrant, I don't know. It's just really hard to say. They could have even, Doctor Who'd themselves into a totally different time. They could have time traveled with that. It'll be interesting to see, because for those of you who don't know, they got there partly because their chief engineer has been cybernetically altered in order to manipulate time and space in order to get the ship to go places faster than warp speed, and his eyes kind of changed at the end, and I was even flashing back to Gary Mitchell there.
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. You're not the only one who was thinking Gary Mitchell. So I wonder if they're somewhere near the galactic barrier, which is why Mitchell got his wacky eyes. So, you know, maybe there's that. Maybe there is a time difference, and if there is, then that should be kind of funky, because particularly if they went ahead, I think would be even more remarkable than if they go back.
Well, and the other thing too, another reason why I thought Gary Mitchell, and again, you know, you can cut a trailer and a teaser to look like anything, but there's that short bit in the teaser for the second half of the season where you see where you see him throw Dr. Culber, his partner. It gets kind of violent there in sickbay, and again, that just kind of recalls Gary Mitchell flexing his new psychic muscles and testing his powers. So I don't know. I think they're at the barrier.
We're going to find out in 6 days. Woo-hoo!
Oh my God, I can't wait. So we'll probably be talking about Discovery a lot the next episode as well.
No doubt. And of course, if you have fan please feel free to tell us what you think they are, including if suddenly everything's a dream and they're inside somebody's snow globe.
Yeah, and you know what? If we'll be recording the next show after the season premieres again, so if we get some new details and you get some new fan theories, by all means send them in, and maybe we'll read our favorite ones on the show.
We'll give them dramatic readings. So next time you want to talk more about Last Jedi next time.
I want to unpack some more things from The Last Jedi. There's some things in there that I've been reading on the internet and just even in casual conversation with people that seemed pretty obvious to me from the film, but apparently they're confusing some people, so I'm going to unpack some of that. And who knows, maybe more controversy will erupt and we can talk about that. But that was just something on my radar because we already talked so long about The Last Jedi today, and there was just no way possible we could talk about it all.
There's more to come, I'm sure. So awesome. So we will look forward to that, and I know there'll be plenty more to discuss. Also, because we know Jodie Whittaker is now the Doctor, so that should be we can bring that up as well. Maybe we'll talk to Ponkin again. So shall we wrap?
Let's wrap.
Because I've got a turkey in the oven and I'm hoping it had been sitting on the counter for a while, so hopefully it won't kill us.
That would be bad if the turkey killed you. I would have to host the show alone. They would have to listen to me talk by myself the whole time. That would be bad.
So hopefully we will not have killer turkey. But if we do, then this podcast has been my testament to all of you.
So, Happy New Year to everybody who listens, and thank you for a great 2017. And just as you go into the new year, don't put any undue pressure on yourself. Just make good choices for you.
Absolutely. Thank you also for a wonderful 2017. And we're looking forward to the future. And yeah, have a happy. Keep us with you.
May the force be with you. Live long and prosper. Peace out.
Don't let turkeys kill you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Music provided by Infocation. Send mail to hosts@semanticshenanigans.com. Follow us on Twitter at 2shenanigans. That's the number, not the word. 2shenanigans. On Facebook, you can find us at Semantic Shenanigans. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Semantic Shenanigans. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time right here on Semantic Shenanigans.